A decade ago, Spain was Europe's economic weak link, crippled by sky-high unemployment, a devastating housing crash, and a financial crisis that forced an EU bailout. Fast forward to today, and Spain is doing what few expected, outpacing Germany and France in economic growth, slashing unemployment, and attracting record foreign investment. How did Spain, once the sick man of Europe, transform itself into the continent's economic standout? What policies, industries, and unexpected factors fueled this rise? And most importantly, can Spain sustain this momentum, or is this just a temporary high? Let's break it all down. From 2013 to 2022, Spain's GDP growth consistently outperformed Italy and France. Spain's economy expanded by 5.5% in 2022, which was among the highest in the EU, compared to Italy's 3.7% and France's 2.6% growth in the same year. This marks a significant shift in Spain's economic position within Europe. Spain's journey from economic fragility to becoming Europe's standout performer didn't happen overnight. It was the result of years of painful reforms, economic diversification, and strategic policy shifts that reshaped the country's financial landscape. To understand this transformation, we need to look back at the struggles Spain faced and the key turning points that led to its current success. In the early 2000s, Spain was booming, fueled largely by a real estate and construction bubble. Between 1999 and 2007, housing prices doubled, and banks aggressively issued loans, creating an illusion of endless prosperity. But when the 2008 global financial crisis hit, the bubble burst, leaving Spain in an economic freefall. Unemployment skyrocketed to 26% by 2013, the second highest in the Eurozone, only behind Greece. Youth unemployment surpassed 50%, devastating an entire generation. The banking system collapsed, forcing Spain to seek a $100 billion bailout from the European Union in 2012. The economy shrank by nearly 9% between 2008 and 2013. As businesses failed, households defaulted on loans, and government debt surged. Spain was written off as one of Europe's weakest links. But what happened next was unexpected. Instead of following a short-term stimulus-based recovery, Spain pursued deep structural reforms that rebuilt its economy from the ground up. Here's how. Spain's labor market was a major obstacle to economic growth. Rigid, inefficient, and dominated by temporary contracts that left workers vulnerable and businesses reluctant to hire. Severance costs were among the highest in Europe, and collective bargaining agreements often prevented companies from adjusting wages to economic conditions. Resultantly, the labor market collapsed under pressure, leading to record-high unemployment after the 2008 crisis. To turn the tide, Spain introduced landmark labor reforms in 2012, designed to boost flexibility, increase job stability, and enhance business competitiveness. These reforms included more flexible wage structures that allowed companies to set salaries based on their financial health rather than rigid nationwide agreements. Easier hiring and firing processes that reduced legal uncertainties and severance costs to encourage permanent contracts over temporary ones. Encouraging long-term employment, which incentivized businesses to hire full-time workers rather than rely on unstable short-term contracts. The impact was transformative. Since these changes, unemployment fell from a staggering 26% in 2013 to below 12%, its lowest level in over 15 years. Over 4 million jobs were created, making Spain one of the EU's top job creators. Foreign investors took notice, pouring money into Spain's growing industries due to improved labor flexibility. By tackling its labor market inefficiencies head-on, Spain didn't just recover, it became a magnet for investment and a hub for job creation in Europe. The second area where Spain did major reforms was its banking system. The 2008 financial crisis exposed its reckless lending practices, particularly in the real estate sector. Banks had overextended loans during Spain's property boom, and when the bubble burst, the system nearly collapsed. By 2012, bad loans accounted for over 13% of total lending, making Spain's banking crisis one of the worst in Europe. To restore stability, Spain undertook a massive banking sector overhaul, including merging weak banks. Dozens of struggling banks were consolidated to strengthen the financial system. Stricter regulations, tighter lending standards, and oversight prevented reckless risk-taking. Cleaning up bad debt, banks were forced to restructure their balance sheets, offloading toxic real estate assets. The results were remarkable. By 2015, bad loans had dropped by over 50%, stabilizing the sector. Spanish banks became some of the healthiest in Europe, outperforming their Italian and French counterparts. Investor confidence rebounded, ensuring a steady flow of foreign capital into Spain's economy. Today, Spain's banking system is no longer a ticking time bomb. It's a foundation of economic resilience, supporting growth and investment in ways few would have predicted a decade ago. Thirdly, in response to the financial crisis, Spain implemented strict fiscal discipline, significantly reducing its budget deficit from a staggering 11% of GDP in 2012 to under 4% in 2023. This was achieved through a combination of spending cuts, tax reforms, and improvements in public sector efficiency. These efforts, besides stabilizing the economy, allowed Spain to reduce its borrowing costs. When the COVID-19 pandemic devastated economies across Europe, Spain was among the hardest hit. With tourism, one of its economic pillars, coming to a standstill and businesses struggling under lockdowns, Spain's GDP plunged by 11% in 2020, one of the worst contractions in the EU. Recognizing the urgency of the crisis, the European Union launched the $750 billion Recovery and Resilience Facility to help member states rebuild. Spain emerged as one of the biggest beneficiaries, securing $140 billion in grants and loans, the second largest allocation after Italy.
So how has Spain used this massive injection of funds?
Spain has directed a large portion of the EU funds toward its green energy revolution. With investments in solar, wind, and hydrogen projects, Spain is focusing to cut carbon emissions by 55% by 2030. This focus boosted a range of clean energy industries. The Spanish government also prudently used EU funds to modernize public administration and digital services to fuel Spain's digital economy, and earmarked billions for expanding high-speed internet and 5G networks, boosting AI and tech startups. To future-proof its economy, Spain is using the funds in semiconductors and critical tech industries and to revitalize the automotive industry, making it a hub for EV production. Spain's economy is now outpacing most of Europe, proving that a crisis can be a catalyst for long-term transformation. Spain's remarkable economic recovery and growth over the past decade can be attributed to several key drivers that have transformed it from one of the weakest economies in Europe to one of its most dynamic. These factors, ranging from industry diversification to foreign investment, have played a crucial role in reshaping Spain's economic landscape and positioning it for future success. One of the most significant drivers of Spain's economic success has been its industrial diversification. After the 2008 crisis, Spain shifted its focus from construction and real estate towards high-value manufacturing, technology, and renewable energy. This shift was fueled by strategic investments in key sectors such as automotive manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, and aerospace. Spain is now Europe's second-largest car manufacturer, with global companies like Volkswagen, Renault, and Stellantis setting up large production facilities across the country. The automotive sector alone accounts for about 10% of Spain's GDP and employs over 300,000 people. This is a testament to how Spain has turned its manufacturing capabilities into one of its main economic pillars. The pharmaceutical industry has also seen substantial growth, with Spain becoming one of the leading producers of medicines in Europe. The country is home to several multinational pharmaceutical companies, and the industry contributed nearly $32 billion to GDP in 2023. Spain's renewable energy sector has been another key driver, particularly in solar and wind power. The country has invested heavily in green energy infrastructure, becoming a global leader in solar power production, with more than 11% of its electricity coming from solar energy. Spain is also the second-largest producer of wind energy in Europe. By 2023, the renewable energy sector was providing over 40% of Spain's energy needs, contributing both to sustainability and economic growth. Alongside industrial diversification, foreign investment has been a major driver of Spain's economic success. Spain's open market policies, coupled with labor reforms and improved financial stability, have made it a prime destination for global investors. In 2023 alone, Spain attracted over $30 billion in foreign direct investment, making it the third-largest recipient of FDI in the European Union. Compare this to Italy, which received $18 billion, and France, which garnered $27 billion. What stands out here is not just the volume of foreign investment, but also the sectors Spain is drawing this capital into. Unlike Italy and France, which are still heavily reliant on traditional industries like automotive and energy, Spain is making strides in emerging sectors like clean energy and digital transformation. Tourism has remained another significant contributor, accounting for about 12% of Spain's GDP. Following the pandemic, Spain's tourism sector rebounded rapidly, with international arrivals reaching 83 million in 2022. Spain has consistently ranked as the second most visited country in the world, with major cities like Barcelona and Madrid continuing to draw millions of visitors each year. The resilience of the tourism sector has played a critical role in driving economic recovery post-COVID-19. Lastly, the digital transformation of Spain's economy has been a key success factor. The country has invested heavily in digital infrastructure, with over 95% of the population having access to high-speed internet. This is particularly impressive when compared to countries like Italy, where rural areas still face broadband access challenges, and France, where digital infrastructure expansion has faced regulatory and logistical hurdles. In fact, Spain's digital economy is expected to contribute over $70 billion by 2025, representing nearly 8% of GDP. Startups and tech companies in Madrid, Barcelona, and Valencia have attracted considerable venture capital, making Spain a hotspot for innovation in southern Europe. Spain's economic success is the result of a strategic mix of industrial diversification, technological innovation, foreign investment, and government-led reforms. These drivers have not only fueled short-term growth, but have also laid the groundwork for sustainable, long-term prosperity, positioning Spain as a rising economic powerhouse in Europe. While Spain's economic transformation has been impressive, it is not without its challenges and risks that could potentially threaten its long-term stability. Despite significant strides in labor market reforms, digital innovation, and foreign investment, several key obstacles still loom large on the horizon. One of the most pressing issues facing Spain is the persistent regional economic disparities. While regions like Madrid, Catalonia, and the Basque Country have seen robust growth, other areas, particularly in the south and some rural parts, continue to struggle with high unemployment rates. The national unemployment rate of 12% is an improvement from the crisis years. But in regions like Andalusia and Extremadura, youth unemployment remains well above 30%. This uneven economic development threatens to create social tensions and can hinder the country's overall economic cohesion. Despite fiscal discipline efforts, Spain's public debt remains one of the highest in Europe, reaching 115% of GDP by the end of 2023. This debt load limits the government's ability to invest further in essential public services, social welfare, and future growth sectors. While the country's economy is growing, its fiscal space remains constrained, especially with potential future downturns or economic shocks that might require additional government intervention. Like many European economies, Spain has struggled with inflationary pressures, particularly in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic and the energy crisis triggered by the Russia-Ukraine war. In 2022, Spain's inflation rate peaked at 8.4%, driven primarily by soaring energy and food prices. Although inflation cooled in 2023, it still averaged around 3.5%, higher than the European Central Bank's (ECB) target of 2%. While government interventions, such as tax cuts on essential goods and subsidies on energy bills, have helped stabilize consumer prices, the risk of inflationary shocks remains. Any further disruptions in global energy markets or supply chains could push inflation back up, eroding household purchasing power and undermining Spain's economic competitiveness. Spain's tourism sector is an undeniable economic powerhouse, but its reliance on tourism poses a risk. The sector contributes around 12% of GDP, and while it has rebounded significantly after the pandemic, it is highly sensitive to global economic conditions, political instability, and health crises. A global recession or another pandemic could significantly impact Spain's tourism revenue, undermining the economic gains made in other sectors. Furthermore, with global concerns about sustainability, Spain must work to diversify its tourism offerings to meet the rising demand for more eco-friendly and sustainable travel options. If Spain can navigate these challenges effectively, it has the potential to not only remain an economic leader in Europe, but also become a model for other nations seeking sustainable growth in an era of global uncertainty.